Greetings, I'm Dike Rostant. Welcome to In Depth. We've recently had a slew of dignitaries from different jurisdictions visiting us, and we are very happy to speak with the ambassador of Ukraine to Trinidad and Tobago, Sergiy Kyslytsya. Welcome, Ambassador. Thank you for making the time. How are you?
Very well. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm all right, thank you. I'm not sure what sort of hospitality has been sent your way, but hopefully you are enjoying Trinidad and Tobago thus far.
Well, I enjoy it very much. I'm here for the second time. I came here for the first time back in October last year. I am happy to be back. I'm happy to see blue sky, no rain. The rain hit the island before I landed. So I'm pretty much comfortable here. Thank you.
And it's nice to be able to look and to be able to share these pleasantries, but at the same time, things are not as rosy in Ukraine. Can you please speak to, I guess we can start off with some of the solidarity that has been expressed with Ukraine against the backdrop of what Russia is doing in terms of aggression?
Well, I need to immediately acknowledge that everyone in Ukraine is very much aware about who is on the right side of the history when it comes to the support of territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. I am ambassador to the United Nations, and I'm proud that Trinidad and Tobago is one of 141 countries that resolutely voted in favor of the United Nations General Assembly resolution on the 2nd of March that condemned the act of aggression by the Russian Federation. So the spirit of unity of overwhelming majority of the General Assembly countries behind the need to defend the UN Charter is very much visible. And I'm very proud that Trinidad and Tobago, along with many other countries, is supporting us, and by supporting us, supports the principles and objectives that all of us laid down when we conceived the United Nations.
It seems, and there's something that you said just now, Ambassador, in terms of being on the right side of history. Other people have spoken of history will judge them in the end and their actions. What does it mean to be ambassador? You're not resident here, but ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago, a sovereign nation that recognizes the sovereignty of Ukraine and stands in solidarity.
You know, I wish I were here as a full-fledged ambassador with residence in Port of Spain, and I would enjoy this beautiful country every day. Well, for the time being, I'm resident in New York, and being in New York provides you with a unique opportunity to see with your own eyes every second day, if not every day. Then when it comes to the General Assembly, for example, where all of us have the right to decide. In the General Assembly, unlike in the Security Council, it does not really matter if you are of the size of Australia or Canada, or you are of the size of Liechtenstein or San Marino or Lithuania or Trinidad and Tobago, because you have the very same vote as all other countries. Therefore, it doesn't really matter whether you are a permanent member or not in the Security Council when you vote in the General Assembly. And I think that the spirit of democracy does really matter, especially against the backdrop of the failure of the Security Council to act meaningfully due to the position of the Russian Federation in the Security Council and due to the veto right that the Russian Federation is allowed to apply.
And democracy there are many things that are enshrined within democracy, but sometimes there can be an effect through distance that someone says, this does not necessarily apply to me. I don't need to pay particular attention to it. What is your take on it? What are some of the implications of some of the actions that are taking place in Ukraine on the rest of the world at this point in time, Ambassador?
Look, what we are dealing right now, and when I say we, I mean, of course, first of all, Ukraine, but also the collective civilized world. What we are dealing right now is a kind of war that can only be compared with the Second World War in the territory of Europe. By scale of destruction, by numbers of those who have been killed or injured. You know, there are towns in Ukraine, for example, like Mariupol. During the Second World War, about 20,000 of citizens were killed in Mariupol. Today, there are much more citizens of Mariupol who are killed. So the scale of destruction in that city has overpassed the scale of destruction of the Second World War too. And the impact on the continent and beyond continent is very visible. It's not only millions of displaced persons that had literally to flee their houses to seek refuge and safety, but also the impact on things like energy security, food security. You know, until we reached that famous Istanbul deal facilitated by the United Nations, we literally had more than 20 million metric tons of grain sitting in the Ukrainian ports, ready to be shipped to third countries. And there are countries around the world that depend on Ukrainian grain up to 70%. So you imagine a country, for example, like Lebanon, that until the war, until the latest invasion rather, used to receive about 70% of the grain from Ukraine. And all of a sudden that supply was interrupted. And Lebanon, without any prejudice to this beautiful country, is not in a position to switch markets. You know, it's not like you go to one supermarket, it's closed, and you go to another supermarket. There are many countries who are in a very dire position when it comes to their ability to buy things and to change the supply chains. So,
and looking at the position that you're talking about, Ambassador, and you spoke about food, you spoke about energy, and there's something else that you did, but we will discuss it on the other side of the break. Stay with us. We'll return with more. Ambassador, one of the things that you spoke about, you just said war, and then you modified the term you used and you said invasion. And I want you to take me down that road a little more, please, in the sense that what are some of the things that people are hearing that may be less than truth? Disinformation, propaganda, what are some of the things that you have to combat on a daily basis?
Right. Well, it's indeed a very good question, because it is very important to be aware that the war of Russia against Ukraine did not start on the night of 23rd, 24th of February. The war started back more than 8 years ago, in 2014, when Russia moved in Crimea and tried to illegally annex that part of Ukraine. And then Russia instigated the war in the eastern part of Ukraine. So we were trying to resolve that conflict for more than 8 years. What happened on the night of the 23rd New York time, 24th morning European time, was an upgrade of that war. It was a full-scale invasion that was launched on that day. So it is not true to say that the war started on the 24th. That's why I corrected myself. And misinformation and propaganda is visibly present. It has become part of our life. I mean, on every single level, be it our everyday way of reading the news, when people mostly these days read the headlines and they do not really dare or have no time to read the piece of news itself. Be it the concise, compacted way of presentation of the news on Twitter, or be it deliberately misleading the public. And what is very prominent now that there are actors in the area of misinformation who, unlike liars, because liars lie because they want to hide the truth, spread totally untrue information, not even caring about the truth. So they spam this information space with conspiracy theories, with histories or narratives that have no scientific or scholarly basis. And it is very difficult. I mean, every citizen, even in time of peace, experiences difficulties reading the news. And I think it's the duty of the governments to assist every citizen how to read the news. I'm against the governments indoctrinating the citizens, but I think it's our duty to help our citizens to have access to true information.
I think it's interesting you talk about helping individuals or helping persons read the news, because I think sometimes when you talk about government and you talk about information, there are certain connotations that go with that. But I appreciate the fact that you're able to give us statistics, you're able to give us information like that. And I want to take it back once more to food security, or in some cases, as you cited with Lebanon, food insecurity. What are some of the other effects? So Lebanon is one of those countries, those jurisdictions that are already feeling the pinch. What are some other ripple-on effects of this invasion or this further invasion and upgrade of the war as you described?
Well, food insecurity was already quite prominent even before the invasion. So the invasion of Russia, of Ukraine, only aggravated the situation. We should not really forget that the entire world barely came out of the COVID years, and the pressure on many governments, I'm sure even in this country and even in rich societies as well, I mean, was incredible. So let alone some poor countries in Africa, because a significant portion of our food supply goes to Africa and Asia. We used to export more than 5 million tons per month. And we are now, due to the deal that we managed to break with the facilitation of the United Nations, we, in the course of the last months, we exported more than 1.5 million tons of grain, which is still 4 times less that we could have exported to the markets under normal circumstances. So I think that there are many parts of the world, and especially in Africa, where starvation can become hunger. And the multiplication effect of this hunger on social problems and unrest will be incredible. So we are living in a very challenging world where climate change, other factors make our life already miserable. So one of the reasons everybody hates this war that Russia launched against Ukraine is that it destructs so much money, so much so many resources, so many efforts that we, under other circumstances, would have invested in meeting the challenges that were already there.
And when you say grain, Ambassador, I'm thinking wheat. Is it just wheat, or are there other grains that you're talking about in terms of being exported?
No, I mean, it's a very wide range of different grains. And let me tell you, for example, that Ukraine has 55% of the world share of sunflower oil. So believe it or not. So Ukraine is a breadbasket, as we all used to say, not only of Europe, but beyond Europe. So we export grain, we export vegetables, apples, berries. You can see Ukrainian berries in Singapore supermarket, which is not very essential for the purposes of dealing with hunger, but it illustrates how important the agriculture sector of Ukraine is. And let me remind you that Ukraine is not an agricultural country, although the agriculture is an important part of the Ukrainian economy. We are a very advanced IT country. We are very advanced country in terms of steel production or aircraft manufacturing and high technology sectors of economy. So we lived a very peaceful life, upgrading literally our standards every year. We were approximating our legal system and our economy, our trade with Europe, hoping to get the membership of the European Union when we meet the standards. And that war literally undermined not only the Ukrainian way of life, not only the Ukrainian plans, but affected dramatically the interests of countries that may be easily 10,000 kilometers away from Ukraine.
And with that in mind, though, looking at the fact that you don't necessarily cite yourself as an agri-centric country, but at the same time, there's so much impact. So there's this breadbasket effect that you're talking about. And looking at all the ways that Ukraine, one, has been affected, and two, this war has affected others. What does this do for energy prices from your view?
As much or even more as food is weaponized by Putin, the energy supply is weaponized, the gas supply rather is weaponized by Putin as well. I mean, because there are countries in Europe, and not only in Europe, that are 85% dependent on the Russian gas supply. There are governments in Europe, unfortunately, that have not invested enough time and money in diversifying the sources of energy supply. So when wars came to wars, I mean, they found themselves totally in a situation where when the Russian Federation tries to manipulate with their foreign policy or with their security policy. So the prices for gas supply, for gas, natural gas, skyrocketed in Europe up to $2,500 compared to what it used to be like $200. So you can imagine the cost of not only of heating the households, but also of production, of supply, and this energy price has multiplying effect on many chains. So it's not only about how you heat your house during the very harsh European winter. It's also how much you pay for the delivery of produce, how much you pay for the production, how much you pay for many other things. So I think it is being weaponized to the extent incredibly awful. And if Europe raises prices for production, it means that many types of export coming out of Europe will also be much costly to buy to countries that depend on the supply of highly technological things from Europe.
And we want to thank you so much, Ambassador Sergiy Kyslytsya, for actually sensitizing us a little more, showing the impact. Because sometimes we have the information, but we don't necessarily see how this can potentially, if not directly already, affect us where we are. And on behalf of the entire TTT News team, I'm Dike Rostant. This has been In Depth. Thank you so much for joining us.